How to stay on top of online technology in an ever-changing world. In this part of the presentation, I want to assure you that no, it's not you. And yes, online tech can be overwhelming and frustrating, even if you're smart, usually a quick learner, and very resourceful. I'm Anke Herrmann. I'm based in the south of Spain, but as you can tell, I'm not Spanish. I'm originally from Germany, but I've been living in Spain for the last 16 years. And I'm a passion business coach and online tech mentor. And what that means is, moving myself out of the way here, that I work with creatives, authors, coaches, basically free spirits who have a craft or passion or a mission or cause they're really passionate about and want to turn that into a business. And one thing I've noticed is that online technology often gets in the way because it's this hurdle that feels overwhelming, and it's this rabbit hole that's so easy to get sucked into. And basically, if you know what I'm talking about, is I often compare it to video games. If you're new in the tech world, and if you're anything like me, like I really am probably the most useless person you've ever come across when it comes to video games. But the sensation is really the same. It's you trying your best to somehow figure out how this thing works, and before you know it, you basically get whacked around and you get blows and your life force dwindles before you ever had a chance to figure out how this whole thing works. And it leaves you, well, frustrated. It feels you out of your depth, and that's never a pleasant feeling. And it's easy to think that there's something that you're doing wrong, something that um, you're not good enough and you're not equipped for it. And so I really want to prove to you that that's not true. And so the obvious problem with online technology is the chaos of options, as people often call it. There's so many different tools available, and they change constantly. It's something that you figured out once might not work anymore 6 months later because they've come out with a new version and everything's different now. And there's also that element that there's so many people who are experts in a particular tool or approach, and when you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So they sell you their solution and they try and squeeze your business into their solution, and you have a hard time knowing who you can trust. It's a bit like in the nutrition industry, in the diet industry. There's loads of not quite trustworthy experts trying to sell you their solution, and it can really feel like a minefield. And there's also that sensation of opening a can of worms every time you look at something a little closer. And the thing is, most of the time, if you're not, if you're not 20, if you're a little bit older, then you didn't grow up with online tech in the way that, young kids these days do. So chances are you've never really been taught the basics, right? And there's a definition of learning that really hit home for me, and that says that learning is connecting something unknown to something known. And when somebody explains something in words that don't mean anything to you, then the whole explanation doesn't make sense. And if you've ever read a tech manual for something that you didn't understand, that's what I'm talking about, right? And it happens often, like it happens with language learning too. So you can read a grammar book and you don't know what they're talking about. And at the end of the day, you're still as, you know as much as you knew in the beginning, just now you feel stupid about it because you think you should know. And so the thing really is how fast and how easily you learn something depends on how many reference points you already have. And I quite often like to compare it when you land in a new city. Initially, you know the way from the hotel to the bus stop or to the local pub or wherever. And then as you take walks and as you start exploring things, you find more and more corners and more landmarks that you start recognizing. And if you stay there long enough, you come to a point that you know your way around. They could drop you anywhere and you'll find your way home, no problem. But initially, when you don't have any reference points, you get dropped off somewhere in the street you don't know, and you stand there and you have no idea what's happening and where you are and how you're going to get home. Now, basically, what I'm saying is I'm reminding you that that's exactly the same in the world of online technology. It really comes down to expectations, and there is often that sensation that we have the expectations that, yeah, that tech stuff, we should just know it, right? Because if you compare how long you think somebody takes to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, you go through law school, and then at the end of it, you come out a baby lawyer. You don't expect to be really experienced at it until you've had experience, until you've had work experience and you've worked with some clients and you've had some supervision. And so there's this whole learning process that we accept as normal and necessary for pretty much any area of expertise, except when it comes to tech. There's that expectation that you should just know. Now, what if that wasn't true? Right? Now, often people will say, oh, I just don't want to deal with it at all. It's not an area of expertise that I want to invest that amount of time and money into to get good at it. I started off with a sewing business, right? And a lot of people I know and clients I've worked with will always say, I started a sewing business because really what I want is I want to sew all day, every day. And they thought that a sewing business will give them that. Coaches often fall in that, I just want to coach people. I don't want to deal with all this stuff. I don't want to deal with API keys and mailing providers and websites, and I don't want to deal with any of that. Now, that is also a question of expectations, because if you run a business, well, yeah, there are a lot of other things that you're going to have to deal with. You will need to know something about accounting. You will need to know something about marketing and selling. And you will need to know something about tech, even if it's just enough so that you can be a good client for somebody to outsource it to. And we'll get to that part in another part of the presentation. So the idea, I just want nothing to do with it, it's also something where you might want to question your expectations rather than your capabilities. Now, the main reason people struggle with technology and find the number of options out there confusing and overwhelming is because there is a layer of complexity that hardly anybody ever talks about. And especially people who sell the tools, right? And online technology, when you talk about online technology, we're always talking about tools. They're basically platforms or software, something that has been designed to make your life easier in some way. And so nobody wants things to take long and be complex. So everybody looks for quick and easy solutions. So any provider will offer exactly that. They offer quick and easy. And the problem is that they entice you to skip the bit that comes before even choosing a tool. And if you skip that, it feels as if you walk into a hardware store, giant hardware store, and you want to build a shelf and you haven't got a clue. You don't know yet whether whether you want it to be a wooden shelf or a metal shelf, or you have no idea how big it's going to be. And so you just overwhelmed by the number of options, right? So there are a few things that you need to think about before you even look at tools. And they've got nothing to do with technology. But when you skip that part, the tech's going to be overwhelming. Now, a classic example is Photoshop, right? When I remember the very first time I owned a copy of Photoshop, I was very excited because, having the Ferrari of photo editing was very exciting. So I opened up the software and I'm like, what on earth is that, right? The workspace initially didn't really make sense to me at all, but I'm like, okay, no problem, because, I'm pretty disciplined. I go through the manual and I'll get a quick overview of what this thing does and how it works. So I'm used to figuring this stuff out really quickly, right? And so I'm looking at the manual, at the online help, and I'm like, what? And it was a classic case of connecting something unknown to something unknown. I looked through the manual and I kind of felt I understood less after reading that than before, because all the functionality, the manual described how the functions worked. What they didn't describe was what these functions were. Because I really quickly realized as well, in order to use Photoshop to its capacity, I needed to understand about photography. I needed to understand about colors, about layers, about filters, and about lighting, and about all sorts of things. Because otherwise, all this functionality that's available makes no sense to me, right? There's another classic that is website builders, or even worse, mobile phone app builders. I built a mobile phone app recently, and there was a new platform which looked promising, and I mean, it was a great platform. I'm happy to recommend it, but they also sold, build your mobile app, in 3 simple clicks, no coding experience required. And it was true. There was no coding experience required. But when I looked at how this worked, I thought, well, for somebody who's never built an app before, somebody who hasn't got a background in software development and knows about data structure, about user interface design, about how a user actually interacts with software, this is going to be a nightmare, right? So it's, before you can build your own app, you need to understand about data structure. You need to understand about user interface design and workflow designs and things like that. So, and I could go on. There's loads of examples like that. And it's just, there's nothing wrong with that. You can learn whatever you need to learn in that area. But if you try and skip it, then you're going to struggle with the tool. And so that's basically, again, it's not you. It's just you being enticed to the, to use a tool for its simplicity. And if you know the full picture, if you know that there's another part that is necessary to look into, then basically you know what's going on. And that's quite a different situation. Now, if I were to give you just one tip, how to find your way into this whole area, is learn how to ask better questions. because it's something that I see all the time, that when people, well, there's an example, and it's a real example. Somebody actually literally asked me that. And somebody asked and said, hey, what's the best way to compress a video? I'm like, why would you want to compress a video? So I started asking. And well, it turns out, well, I want to, because I need to email videos. I'm like, why would you need to email videos? And well, bottom line, at the end of the day, the person had run an online workshop, and they had the Zoom recording, and now we're looking for a way to share that Zoom recording with the attendance of the workshop, right? So now if you Google how to compress a video, you get links to little tools that compress videos, and then you get in all sorts of things about codecs and file types and file sizes, and you're going to go like, holy, like, I don't know, what is this, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're looking for is how to share a recorded Zoom, and the best way to share a workshop recording. Then you get a totally different set of answers, right? So basically, anytime you're about to ask for Google something, do the in-order test 2 or 3 times, and only Google the thing that comes up at the very end. So instead of how to compress a video file, ask for how to share a workshop recording, right? Because if you ask questions like that, if you ask for what you really want, not for what you imagine the solution will to be, then all of a sudden it opens a whole different range of options that you can't ask for specifically, because you might not even know they exist. So that alone will make a huge difference to how you find the information that you need online. So that's it for part 1. If you've got any questions, please get in touch, and yeah, basically I'll see you back in part 2.